long before the Shire became a place of quiet routines and simple joys. Long before hobbits learned to measure time by harvests and second breakfasts, the fate of Middle-earth was already being forged in fire. In an age when magic still shaped the land and power walked openly among kings and lords, the rings of power were created. They were born from skill and vision, but also from subtle manipulation. 3 rings were given to the elves, crafted to preserve beauty, memory, and balance. 7 rings were entrusted to the dwarves, masters of stone and flame, whose unyielding spirits matched their love for wealth and craftsmanship. 9 rings were granted to men, whose ambition burned bright, but whose hearts were most vulnerable to temptation. Yet none of these rings were truly independent, for behind them all stood a single, hidden design. In the fires of Mount Doom, Sauron, the Dark Lord, forged the One Ring. This was not merely a tool, but a vessel. Into it he poured his will, his cruelty, and his desire to impose order through domination. The ring was alive in purpose, bound to its maker, amplifying his power while binding the fate of all others to it. Through the One Ring, Sauron sought not chaos, but control. A world bent to a single vision where freedom itself would be extinguished. When he wore it, his presence became overwhelming, and Middle-earth fell under a shadow that spread through fear rather than force alone. But even absolute power invites resistance. The free peoples of Middle-earth formed an alliance of necessity. Elves and men stood together against a threat that promised the end of all choice. The war that followed was vast and devastating, reshaping lands and lives alike. At its climax, Sauron himself entered the battlefield, confident in the ring's supremacy. Yet fate, indifferent to certainty, intervened. Isildur, Prince of Men, cut the ring from Sauron's hand, severing his physical form and ending the war in a moment that seemed like victory. The Dark Lord was defeated, his armies scattered, and hope appeared to return. But this moment also marked the beginning of a far more insidious tragedy. The ring lay before Isildur, glowing with silent promise. He was urged to destroy it, to end its influence forever. Yet the ring spoke to him without words, appealing to pride, legacy, and fear of loss. It did not demand cruelty. It offered preservation. Isildur claimed it as a wergild, a compensation for his fallen kin. In doing so, he became the ring's next victim. The corruption was subtle, not immediate. That was its greatest strength. Soon after, the ring betrayed him, slipping from his finger during an ambush and leaving him defenseless. Isildur died alone, and the ring was lost to the river, beginning a long period of silence. Centuries passed, and history faded into legend. Kingdoms rose and fell, unaware that beneath the flow of time, an ancient evil endured. The ring did not sleep. It waited. When it resurfaced, it did so not through conquest, but through chance. Smeagol, a small and curious being, found it beneath the water. The moment he touched it, his life fractured. The ring extended his years unnaturally, feeding his obsession and isolating him from the world. Love turned to possession. Identity eroded. Over time, Smeagol became Gollum, a creature divided against himself, living proof that the ring's corruption did not require armies or ambition. It only required desire. Gollum's existence was a slow decay, hidden from the world, until fate intervened again. The ring slipped away, as if guided by its own will, and found its way to Bilbo Baggins. This transition marked a turning point unlike any before. Bilbo was not a warrior, nor a ruler. He was a hobbit, defined by comfort, curiosity, and kindness. In his hands, the ring did not immediately unleash destruction. Instead, it lingered, subtle and patient. Bilbo aged slowly. He became attached, protective, reluctant to let go. The ring did not force him into darkness. It simply nudged him away from change. This revealed a deeper truth about corruption. It does not always arrive through violence. Sometimes it arrives through hesitation, through the fear of endings. The significance of Bilbo's possession cannot be overstated. For the first time, the ring was held by someone who did not seek power. And yet, even then, it left a mark. This demonstrates the central theme that defines the entire saga. The ring does not discriminate. It corrupts kings and commoners alike, not by amplifying cruelty, but by exploiting weakness. It adapts to its bearer, offering what they most desire, whether that is authority, security, or peace. The shadow of corruption is not merely Sauron's presence in Middle-earth. It is the reflection of unchecked desire within every living being. As the years pass, Bilbo eventually leaves the ring behind, and it falls into the hands of Frodo Baggins. At this point, the story narrows its focus, shifting from mythic history to personal consequence. Frodo does not understand the weight of what he carries. He inherits the ring as one might inherit a family relic, unaware that he has become the center of a struggle far older and greater than himself. The danger remains hidden, but it grows closer. The ring's long patience is nearing its end. What defines this first chapter is not spectacle, but inevitability. Every bearer believes, at least briefly, that they can master the ring or remain untouched by it. Every bearer is wrong. The ring's power lies not in force, but in time. It waits, it adapts, and it corrupts by degrees. This is why its return is so dangerous. Not because it immediately destroys, but because it convinces its bearer that destruction can be delayed. Before armies march, before oaths are sworn, and before destiny is spoken aloud, the war has already begun. It is a war for the will, fought quietly within the hearts of those who believe themselves unimportant. And it is here, in this quiet tension between innocence and corruption, that the true story of the ring begins. The turning point of the story does not arrive with fire or conquest, but with knowledge. When Gandalf the Grey returns to the Shire after long years of silence, he brings with him not celebration, but truth. Through careful study, forgotten records, and quiet fear, he uncovers what the world has tried to forget. The ring left behind by Bilbo Baggins is not a harmless relic of adventure. It is the One Ring, the very core of Sauron's power, long thought lost. With this revelation, the Shire ceases to be a sanctuary. Its green hills and peaceful lanes are no longer hidden from the world. They are exposed, fragile, and dangerously close to the growing shadow in the east. For Frodo Baggins, destiny does not announce itself with grandeur. It presses in slowly, through responsibility rather than desire. Frodo does not seek meaning beyond his home, nor does he dream of greatness. Yet once the truth is revealed, he understands something essential. If the ring remains in the Shire, everything he loves will be destroyed. His decision to leave is not driven by courage alone, but by care. It is the quiet bravery of someone who chooses loss for himself in order to spare others. In this moment, Frodo becomes the heart of the story, not because he is strong, but because he is willing. The road out of the Shire marks a clear separation between innocence and experience. Frodo does not walk it alone. Samwise Gamgee follows, bound not by prophecy or obligation, but by loyalty. Sam's presence grounds the journey, reminding both Frodo and the audience that heroism does not require power or status. It requires commitment. Soon, Merry and Pippin join them, their curiosity and devotion outweighing their fear. Together, the hobbits cross a boundary they can never fully return from. The world beyond the Shire is larger, darker, and indifferent to their smallness. Almost immediately, the ring makes itself known. The ring wraiths emerge, silent and relentless, drawn by the ring's presence. They represent not just danger, but inevitability. These are beings who have already lost themselves to power, shadows of what once were kings. Their pursuit strips away any remaining illusion that the journey can be postponed. Frodo begins to understand that the ring is not passive. It calls out, not loudly, but persistently. It wants to be found. It wants to return. The meeting with Aragorn marks a critical shift in the narrative. Introduced as Strider, a weathered ranger with a guarded past, Aragorn embodies endurance rather than authority. He does not announce his lineage or demand loyalty. Instead, he offers protection, knowledge of the road, and a willingness to stand between the hobbits and the darkness hunting them. Aragorn's strength lies not in command, but in restraint. He understands the ring's danger and refuses its call, not because he is immune, but because he is disciplined. In him, the story introduces a model of leadership, defined by humility and patience. As the group moves toward Rivendell, the cost of the journey becomes undeniable. Frodo is wounded by a blade designed not merely to kill, but to enslave. His survival depends on the intervention of the elves, whose presence reminds the audience of an older world still lingering at the edges of history. Rivendell stands as a fragile refuge, a place where time slows and wounds can heal. Yet even here, the ring brings unease. Its existence disrupts harmony. Peace cannot coexist with something built for domination. The Council of Rivendell expands the scope of the story beyond any single character. Representatives of the free peoples gather to confront a truth none wish to face. The ring cannot be hidden, nor can it be used safely. Every attempt to wield it in the past has led to ruin. The discussion is tense, shaped by fear, pride, and memory. Some see the ring as a weapon, others see it as an unspeakable curse. What unites them is the understanding that the ring's existence endangers all, regardless of borders or allegiance. The conclusion they reach is devastating in its simplicity. The ring must be destroyed, and it can only be destroyed where it was forged, in the fires of Mount Doom, deep within Mordor. The silence that follows this realization is heavy, not because the answer is unclear, but because the cost is obvious. This is not a mission designed for success. It is a last resort. When Frodo volunteers to carry the ring, he does not do so with confidence or pride. He does so because someone must. His words are simple, yet they carry enormous weight. He does not claim the strength to succeed. He only accepts the burden. This moment defines the moral core of the entire saga. Greatness is not claimed by those who seek it, but assumed by those who cannot turn away. Thus, the Fellowship is formed. It is not an army, nor a collection of equals in power. It is a fragile balance of strengths and weaknesses. Gandalf serves as guide and protector, bearing wisdom shaped by long struggle. Aragorn walks as the heir to a throne he has not yet claimed. Legolas and Gimli represent ancient peoples divided by history, but united by necessity. Boromir joins as a man of Gondor, brave and proud, already wrestling with the ring's temptation. At the center stand the hobbits, small and unassuming, yet essential. What defines the Fellowship is not certainty, but trust. Each member brings something the others lack, yet beneath this unity lies tension. The ring tests them constantly, exposing unspoken desires and fears. Even as they set out together, it is clear that this bond will be strained. The fellowship is not meant to remain whole. Its purpose is to move the ring forward, long enough for fate to decide how the burden will truly be carried. As they leave Rivendell, hope and dread travel side by side. The road ahead leads through danger, loss, and sacrifice. Yet this is the moment where Middle-earth draws breath. Against a rising darkness, a small group moves forward, not because they believe victory is assured, but because failure would mean the end of all things. Destiny has called, and it has answered through voices the world never expected to matter. The journey that once moved forward in fragile unity begins to fracture under the weight of reality. What was formed in hope now faces the pressure of fear, loss, and temptation. The fellowship still walks together, but something fundamental has changed. Trust is no longer effortless. Doubt settles quietly among them, fed by exhaustion and the unrelenting presence of the ring. This is the stage where the story abandons any illusion of a clean, heroic path and reveals the true cost of carrying hope through a world that is actively breaking apart. The descent into the mines of Moria marks the first irreversible turning point. Beneath the mountains lies a reminder of past greatness, reduced to silence and ruin. The fellowship enters seeking passage, but finds instead the echoes of failure and pride. Here, ancient ambition has already exacted its price, and the darkness they awaken is not new, but merely waiting. When the Balrog emerges, it is not simply a monster, but a symbol of consequences long delayed. Gandalf's confrontation with it is not a clash of spectacle, but of duty. His fall is deliberate, an act of sacrifice meant to preserve the path forward for others. In losing him, the fellowship loses not only power, but certainty. The guide who understood the road is gone, and the journey must continue without answers. Grief reshapes the group. Silence replaces confidence. Aragorn steps forward, not because he is ready, but because someone must. His leadership emerges under pressure, defined by restraint rather than command. He carries responsibility without assurance, knowing that every decision now risks lives. At the same time, Boromir's internal struggle intensifies. As a son of Gondor, he has lived his entire life beneath the shadow of war. To him, the ring represents not temptation for its own sake, but a means to defend his people. His conflict is tragic precisely because it is understandable. He does not desire domination, he desires security. The ring exploits this, offering strength while hiding its cost. The fracture becomes unavoidable when Boromir attempts to take the ring from Frodo. This moment is not driven by cruelty, but by desperation. It is the inevitable result of prolonged exposure to power that promises solutions without sacrifice. Frodo's realization is immediate and devastating. The ring cannot be shared. It cannot be protected by unity alone. The very bonds meant to safeguard it become vulnerabilities. Frodo's choice to leave the Fellowship is an act of painful clarity. He isolates himself not because he doubts his companions, but because he understands the ring too well. Distance becomes his only defense. Yet fracture does not come without consequence. Boromir's redemption follows swiftly and violently. In defending Merry and Pippin from Saruman's forces, he pays with his life. His death is not framed as punishment, but as reckoning. He dies not as a man corrupted, but as a warrior who remembers who he is. Aragorn's grief is layered with responsibility. He does not condemn Boromir. He honors him. This moment reinforces one of the story's most powerful truths. Failure does not erase worth. And courage can exist alongside regret. With Boromir fallen and Frodo gone, the Fellowship is no more. What remains are fragments moving in different directions, each carrying a piece of the original purpose. Frodo and Sam head east toward Mordor, alone, but resolute. Aragorn, Legolas, and Gimli turn toward war, drawn into the widening conflict consuming Middle-earth. The narrative itself splits, mirroring the emotional division of its characters. This fragmentation is not weakness. It is adaptation. The story acknowledges that unity cannot always be preserved, but purpose can endure, even when bonds are broken. As Frodo and Sam journey deeper into hostile lands, the burden of the ring grows heavier. The world around them becomes harsher, stripped of comfort and mercy. Their guide, Gollum, embodies the ultimate consequence of surrendering to the ring. He is both warning and mirror. Frodo's compassion toward him is not naive. It is born of recognition. Frodo sees in Gollum the future that awaits him should he fail. Sam, however, sees only threat. The tension between mercy and caution defines their relationship, highlighting a central theme of the story. Survival is not only about endurance, but about the choices that shape identity under pressure. While this quiet struggle unfolds, war explodes across the western lands. Saruman reveals the full extent of his betrayal, transforming industry into destruction and unleashing armies forged for brutality. Rohan stands as a line between survival and annihilation. The battle at Helm's Deep is not portrayed as glorious, but as desperate. Every victory is earned through loss. Every defense is temporary. Aragorn proves himself, not through conquest, but through presence. He stands where hope is weakest, reinforcing the idea that leadership is measured by willingness to endure alongside others, not above them. Gandalf's return does not erase suffering. It reframes it. His arrival at dawn signals not rescue, but reinforcement. The night was survived through sacrifice, not miracle. This distinction matters. The story refuses to simplify war into triumph alone. Even when victory comes, it carries the weight of those who did not live to see it. Helm's Deep stands not as a symbol of domination, but of resistance, where survival itself is the achievement. Across all these paths, the cost of war becomes unmistakable. Innocence is lost. Certainty erodes. Characters are shaped not by what they gain, but by what they endure. The ring continues its patient work, not through spectacle, but through erosion. Trust weakens, fear sharpens, and yet, within this fracture, growth emerges. Aragorn steps closer to his destiny. Sam's loyalty deepens into quiet heroism. Frodo's resolve hardens, even as his strength fades. This chapter of the story makes no promises of easy resolution. It confronts the audience with a world where good intentions are tested, unity is fragile, and sacrifice is unavoidable. The Fellowship's breaking is not a failure of purpose, but a reflection of reality. War does not preserve what it touches, it changes it. By the end of this part, Middle-earth stands fully engaged in conflict, and the path ahead is narrower than ever. Fracture has taken its toll, betrayal has revealed its cost, and the price of war has been made painfully clear. The question is no longer whether victory can be achieved, but whether those who fight for it can survive what it demands. As the final phase of the war begins, the story narrows and expands at the same time. The world feels smaller because every road now leads toward a single outcome, yet it feels vast because every life across Middle-earth is drawn into the consequences of that outcome. There are no untouched lands left, no people who can remain neutral. The shadow has grown too long, and it presses against every border. At this stage, the journey is no longer about choosing a direction. It is about enduring what has already been chosen. Destiny no longer whispers, it demands. For Frodo, the burden of the ring has reached a point where it can no longer be separated from his own identity. The object he carries is no longer felt as weight alone, but as presence. The ring intrudes upon his thoughts, narrows his perception, and reshapes his understanding of the world. Food loses its meaning. Rest offers no renewal. The closer he moves toward Mordor, the more the land reflects the ring's influence, stripped of color, mercy, and warmth. This is not merely a hostile environment. It is an extension of the power he carries, responding to its return. Sam remains beside him, constant in a way that contrasts sharply with the instability of everything else. His loyalty is not heroic in the traditional sense. It is stubborn, practical, and deeply human. Where Frodo weakens under the ring's psychological weight, Sam compensates with action. He watches, listens, and endures without expectation of recognition. This imbalance between them is not a flaw, but a necessity. Frodo bears the ring because he must. Sam bears Frodo because someone has to. Together, they form a fragile system of survival, held together by trust rather than strength. Gollum's role grows more dangerous as the journey progresses. His inner conflict sharpens, swinging between obedience and resentment. He understands the ring more intimately than anyone else alive, and that knowledge makes him both guide and threat. Frodo's insistence on mercy is not blind optimism. It is an attempt to assert control over a situation that otherwise offers none. By sparing Gollum, Frodo believes he is preserving a piece of himself. Sam, however, senses the cost of this mercy and fears it will eventually demand payment. This tension is never resolved because the story does not offer simple answers. Compassion and caution stand in constant opposition, each necessary, each dangerous. While this quiet struggle unfolds in the east, the west descends into open war. Gondor becomes the focal point of Sauron's assault, not because it is the strongest, but because it represents resistance. Minas Tirith stands as a final symbol of defiance, its white walls battered by forces designed to overwhelm through fear and exhaustion. The siege is relentless. The enemy does not seek honor or conquest alone, but collapse. The aim is to break the will to fight, to convince defenders that survival is no longer possible. Fire, noise, and despair work together as weapons. Aragorn's path reaches its most decisive moment during this chaos. He no longer walks as a protector in the shadows, but as a leader who must act openly. His choices carry the weight of history and the risk of failure. Unlike those tempted by the ring, Aragorn does not seek shortcuts. He accepts the long road, even when it leads through darkness few would willingly enter. His leadership is defined not by certainty of victory, but by willingness to bear responsibility for others. In a world dominated by the desire for control, Aragorn's strength lies in restraint and service. The battles that follow are fierce and unforgiving. Lives are lost without ceremony. Courage appears in brief flashes, often unnoticed, often unrewarded. The defenders of Gondor and their allies fight not because they believe they will win, but because surrender would render all sacrifice meaningless. This is the essence of the last stand. It is not about triumph. It is about buying time. Every charge, every defense, exists to draw the eye of Sauron away from the true danger unfolding far from the battlefield. This contrast defines the heart of the story. While armies clash and kings rise to meet their fate, the fate of the world depends on two small figures moving through ash and ruin, nearly invisible to the powers they oppose. Frodo's progress slows as the ring's influence reaches its peak. He no longer speaks of returning home. His world has narrowed to a single task, and even that task feels increasingly unreachable. The ring offers relief, certainty, and completion. It tells him that endurance has earned reward. This temptation is not loud, It is intimate. It feels earned. At the edge of Mount Doom, the burden becomes unbearable. Frodo stands where the ring was forged, where its power is strongest, and where his resistance finally collapses. This moment is critical not because it shows weakness, but because it shows truth. Frodo does not fail due to lack of courage. He fails because no one can carry such power without consequence. The ring claims him, just as it claimed those before him. This is the story's most honest admission, yet the narrative does not end in despair. The mercy shown earlier, dismissed by some as foolish, returns with consequence. Gollum's obsession draws him into the final struggle, and in his grasping desire, the ring is destroyed. The victory does not belong to strength, wisdom, or strategy alone. It belongs to a chain of choices shaped by patience, pity, and restraint. Evil is undone not by being overpowered, but by collapsing under its own nature. With the ring's destruction, the foundations of Sauron's power crumble. His forces scatter, no longer bound by a will that sustained them. The great towers fall, and the land begins to breathe again. Yet this release is not joyful. It is quiet, almost solemn. Frodo survives, but survival comes at a cost. He is saved by Sam, whose devotion never faltered even when hope disappeared. Together, they face the aftermath not as victors, but as witnesses to an ending that demanded everything they had. The burden is gone, but the marks remain. This is the final truth of The Last Stand. The world is saved not by flawless heroes, but by those willing to endure failure and continue forward regardless. The ring is destroyed, yet the journey leaves scars that cannot be undone. The burden has passed, but it has reshaped those who carried it. In this moment, the story reaches its emotional peak, reminding us that victory is never free, and that light often survives only because someone was willing to walk into darkness without certainty of return. When the ring is destroyed and the fire that sustained it finally consumes its power, the world does not erupt into celebration. There is no sudden transformation, no instant healing that washes away the weight of everything that has been endured. What follows is quiet, a fragile, uncertain quiet that settles over Middle-earth, like the calm after a storm that has altered the landscape forever. The shadow has fallen, but the scars it left behind remain visible, etched into lands, cities, and hearts alike. Victory, in this story, is not a moment of triumph. It is a state of survival. The fall of Sauron marks the end of an age defined by domination and fear, yet it also marks the beginning of responsibility. With the Dark Lord gone, the world can no longer rely on ancient powers to hold the balance. Aragorn's ascent to the throne is not framed as conquest, but as restoration. He does not claim authority through force, but through endurance, sacrifice, and service. His coronation represents continuity rather than change for its own sake, the healing of a long broken line rather than the rise of a new empire. The crown he accepts carries memory as much as hope, reminding both ruler and people that leadership must now be guided by humility rather than power. Across Middle-earth, the consequences of war unfold slowly. Fields are replanted where armies once marched. Cities rebuild their walls, not in anticipation of glory, but in fear of memory. Songs return, though they are quieter, shaped by loss as much as joy. Merry and Pippin return home transformed, no longer carefree youths, but individuals shaped by responsibility. They carry confidence born not of pride, but of understanding. They have seen what happens when the world fractures, and they know the value of standing when standing matters. Samwise Gamgee's return to the Shire offers the story its most grounded form of hope. Sam does not return seeking recognition. he returns seeking continuity. He plants trees, rebuilds what was damaged, and chooses a life defined by care rather than escape. His journey ends not in legend, but in daily devotion. In Sam, the story affirms that heroism does not always echo through history books. Sometimes it lives quietly in the act of choosing to stay, to nurture, and to remember without bitterness. For Frodo, however, peace is more elusive. Though he survives the journey, he does not emerge whole. The wounds he carries are not only physical. The weight of the ring, the constant pressure of its will, and the trauma of standing at the edge of annihilation have reshaped him in ways that cannot be undone. The Shire, once a symbol of comfort, now feels distant. Frodo smiles and speaks gently, but there is a quiet separation between him and the world he saved. This is not failure, it is consequence. The story refuses to offer a false promise that all sacrifices are rewarded with happiness. Frodo's inability to fully heal stands as one of the most honest conclusions in modern storytelling. He bore a burden meant to break even the strongest, and though he succeeded, the cost was permanent. His choice to leave Middle-earth is not abandonment, it is acceptance. Some wounds require rest beyond the reach of mortal lands. The Undying Lands are not portrayed as escape, but as release. A place where time does not demand endurance, and memory does not reopen old pain. Frodo's departure honors the reality that survival does not always mean recovery. Alongside Frodo's departure comes the fading of magic itself. The elves, long bound to the preservation of beauty and memory, begin their final journey west. Their leaving is quiet, almost solemn, marking the end of an era that can no longer exist in the world that follows. Magic does not vanish in failure. It fades because its purpose has been fulfilled. It guided, protected, and resisted until the world could stand on its own. With the ring destroyed, the forces that sustained ancient wonders no longer have a reason to remain. Gandalf's departure reinforces this transition. He does not stay to advise or rule. His task is complete. The withdrawal of such figures is not abandonment, but trust. Middle-earth must now belong to those who live within it, not to those who watch over it from above. The age of guidance ends, and the age of responsibility begins. This shift is central to the story's meaning. The future will be shaped not by immortality or prophecy, but by choice and consequence. The fading of magic is not portrayed as loss alone, it is also liberation. The world is no longer defined by the constant presence of overwhelming power. Without the ring, no single force can dominate all others. Balance becomes possible because fragility is acknowledged. The story suggests that true peace is not achieved through eternal guardianship, but through shared accountability. The world moves forward not because it is protected from failure, but because it has learned from it. The final moments return the focus to simplicity. Sam stands at his doorstep, hesitating before entering the life he once feared he might never see again. His words are unremarkable, yet they carry the weight of the entire journey. He has been to the edge of darkness and returned, not to rule or to flee, but to live. In that quiet step forward lies the true resolution of the tale. The world is saved not through dominance, but through endurance and compassion. The aftermath of the ring's destruction is not a celebration of victory, but a meditation on cost. Every gain is paired with loss. Every ending opens a space that cannot be refilled. Yet, within this acceptance lies the story's greatest strength. It does not promise that good will always triumph without consequence. It promises only that choosing mercy over control and sacrifice over certainty gives the world a chance to continue. As the ships sail west and the last echoes of ancient power fade into memory, Middle-earth steps into a future shaped by mortal hands. The age of magic closes not with spectacle, but with reflection. What remains is not perfection, but possibility. And in that possibility, the story finds its final truth. That the world endures not because darkness is destroyed forever, but because someone, somewhere, is willing to carry the burden long enough for others to live in the light.